when we're pregnant, everyone is kind of like, wow, you're glowing and you're so beautiful. And you feel like this goddess who's like, has life growing inside of you. And then you kind of get caught up in this like romance. And then when the child is born, there's so many things that no one really talks about to you. And for me, it was a big shock. I did struggle a lot with things like body image, especially. When we want to parent and when we as parents are the first model for our children of any type of relationship or foundation of life, really. And if we are not okay, and if we are not showing up from a place of positivity and assuredness and confidence, then that trickles down to our children. It's so important to remember to practice self-compassion, especially as a mom. We tend to forget, or as a caregiver, any kind of caregiver, is that we are so giving with our love and our attention that we deplete ourselves. And so we need to remember to be compassionate with ourselves, and to give ourselves the nurture and the love that we would give anybody else. We deserve it as well.
I'm curious to know, how did you get into this world, and why did you choose parent coaching?
You and we met many years ago working in the realm of development. And, I continued working in development for overall almost 13, 14 years. And during that time, I got to meet and work with so many different families that required aid. After I became a parent myself, my fascination in, I guess, kind of like sociology and psychology really started to peak. And as most pregnant women do, they start picking up some of these books, these parenting books. And I didn't pick up the pregnancy books on how to deal with pregnancy. I delved straight into the kind of the more psychology-based child psychology and family systems and early childhood development and trauma books and all of that kind of stuff. And I loved it so much that I went and I got a master's in psychology and neuroscience. And Karen and we were pregnant at the same time with our first child. And everything that we were learning after our kids were born, we started applying it, and we started seeing the benefits and the impact, the positive impact that it was having on our children, and seeing how much the way that we were parenting was really benefiting them in such a beautiful way. And so we wanted to, in terms of how did we decide to become parent coaches, it's part of our longer term goals of opening up a center together, where we can invite parents that are facing different challenges with their children around behavioral challenges or parenting challenges, and bringing them into the center. So this is kind of like a first stepping stone, because we ultimately really believe that we care so much about children. We care so much about our future generations and what the future generation is going to be bringing to the world. And that all starts with the child and the parent at home.
But if we take a step back and just talk about you as a mom, having gone through this journey yourself, I mean, this might be way too personal conversation for 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning. But can you tell me a little bit about when the mental shift happened in your head to like, okay, now I'm a mom first, and like, how did that affect how you saw other things in your life, like your career, your body, you're accepting your new role? Because I imagine that comes with its own challenges as well.
Absolutely. I think that for me, I don't know, I can't speak for all moms, but I know that it's quite common where we really romanticize becoming a mom. And, when we're pregnant, everyone is kind of like, wow, you're glowing and you're so beautiful. And you feel like this goddess who's like, has life growing inside of you. And then you kind of get caught up in this like romance. And then when the child is born, there's so many things that no one really talks about to you. And for me, it was a big shock. I did struggle a lot with things like body image, especially. I had a C-section, so my body kind of took much longer. And I'm telling you, like, even 7, 8, 9 months postpartum, people weren't, you know, like I would go to, let's say, some activity-based place, and the staff would tell me pregnant women are not allowed, and I'm like, I'm not pregnant. Like, I know I still look pregnant, but I'm not. And they wouldn't believe me, and it was really frustrating. To just kind of be like, I swear, like, okay, fine, I get it. Like, my stomach is still big. So yeah, I did struggle a lot with body image, hair falling out. I know that your brand, your business with bandanas, my hair fell out so much, which is super common. Like, I actually started going bald here. I started wearing a lot of bandanas and headbands to kind of cover that up. And then, you know, there's the part where like the baby hairs start growing out. So you get all of these, like, just these annoying little frizzy, like, baby hairs. And it does affect with, like, I guess, self-esteem to a certain extent, because I've never had such a dramatic change, you know, like, I've been so familiar and comfortable with my body for decades, and for that to suddenly be a shift was quite difficult.
How long did it take, and how did you begin to accept your new self?
There is kind of like I want to say, like, a grieving afterwards, where once the dust has settled and the baby has grown a few months and you're kind of getting into this new rhythm and this new life, you then are able to kind of look back, you know, I mean, for me, like, I didn't really look in the mirror for several months. And then when I finally had some time to look at myself, I'd be like, oh my God, okay, this is different. And I suppose it's a lot of self-talk. I need a lot of positive self-talk. And I don't really conjure up those thoughts naturally on my own. My husband and my really close friends, they were very supportive in kind of helping me feel like it's okay. It's okay. And also, you need to start, you know, doing things for yourself to make yourself feel good again. And you know, the shift for me was when I stopped focusing so much on the physicality of the changes in my body, and focusing more on getting my mindset in the right place. Once I was able to kind of get in the right space of mind, or that right mind frame of, okay, I need to do things that make me feel happy. I need to do things that, you know, fulfill me personally, as an individual, not as a mother, which a lot of moms tend to forget to do. We kind of get sucked into this really giving all of us away. We give everything away, from breastfeeding, from our body, from our sleep, from everything. We give up so much that we almost forget to refill our own cups and to give something back to ourselves. And that was a practice. It had to almost become ritualistic, and almost I needed my husband to actually put things in my calendar for me. He would actually book in, you know, he would book me training sessions with a, you know, to work out, and book for me massages, and book, because I couldn't do it for myself. And once he did that for me, I was able to kind of get into this new rhythm, and I got into the habit of doing it for myself. And that was really the shift for me, was first getting up here in the right state of mind, and focusing on my mental well-being.
Yeah. And at the time when you were going through all of that, did you think, okay, well, now I want to begin to help other women through this, or did it take a bit longer before you started thinking about the wise parent?
The more we delved into it, and the more that we were studying it and getting certified, the more we were realizing that parenting really comes back to the self. If we, you know, that this, I don't like using cliche sayings, but you can't pour from an empty cup, kind of thing. But it's just so true. And my disdain for that saying initially was, you know, oh, you know, this is kind of like this new age trend of like focusing on the self and the individual, and that's not what motherhood is about. But it's actually much deeper than that. What it really signifies is that when we want to parent, and when we as parents are the first model for our children of any type of relationship or foundation of life, really. And if we are not okay, and if we are not showing up from a place of positivity and assuredness and confidence, then that trickles down to our children. And so that was really it for me, is that I started realizing how important it was for me to understand who I was at my core, what my triggers were, in order to be able to parent. And that's kind of the key foundation of our program as well, in the way that we coach parents. Most parents that come to us, it's usually when they're facing challenges with their children around the realm of, I would call it power struggles or cooperation, sometimes, you know, quote unquote bad behavior, like hitting or extreme tantrums. And then we also have parents that are that really want to work on themselves and their triggers, because it doesn't feel good as a parent to get triggered, because kids do trigger responses in us. And it often leads us to be parenting in a way that isn't in line with our values. And so a lot of parents, I want to say almost every single parent, in addition to wanting to kind of work with their children or improve those power struggles, is really also working on the self and working on kind of minimizing those triggers. So what happens with a parent when they're triggered by their child? Usually the child, I mean, let's take it back to just to give an example of a newborn. When newborns, parents can rationalize that a newborn doesn't have any coping skills whatsoever. They have no understanding of the world, right? So when they're crying, it's because they have basic needs that need to be met, right? Like, I'm hungry, or I'm tired, or I need to be, you know, like, I need connection and affection, to be soothed. So a parent can hear a newborn cry and they're not going to get triggered most of the time. I mean, some parents do, but most parents will understand, like, oh, you know, my child needs me. But as the child starts to get older and they enter those early toddler years, for some reason, as adults, we aren't able to kind of access our rational brain, that cognitive part of the brain that looks at the child and says, oh, you know, my child, you know, is feeling something, and they're not able to communicate it or express it. They kind of look at it as, my child is annoying me, my child is manipulating me, my child is intentionally disrespecting me. And so hence, when we say I'm getting triggered, it's because we are no longer able to access the rational part of our brain, and we kind of enter a more subconscious fight or flight response to our child. And that really, the way that we go about it is we delve into our own childhood. So we work with the parents to kind of explore their own childhood, and the types of behaviors that trigger us in our children, we then kind of ask them to think about, how did that behavior, if you behave that way in your own childhood, how did your parents respond to it? And what we end up discovering is, or these parents, when we do this exercise with them, what they end up discovering is that their parents used to shut down that behavior. Yeah. And because it got shut down in their own childhood, their subconscious now identifies this unsafe, annoying behavior in their child, and the subconscious reacts or gets triggered and wants to squash it in their own children. Tantrums, for example, it's first of all developmentally normal and expected and healthy, actually. And so that's why we always start with teaching the basics around, like, neurobiology, the brain, in very layman terms. We don't get super geeky on the parents, but we try to kind of lay the foundations of what is going on in your child's brain when they are behaving this way versus this way. And we kind of teach that language to the parents. And then we get them to become more emotionally literate with their children, so that they can increase their attunement to their children. Because really, once a parent is attuned to their child's needs and their emotions, that's when you can start talking about what strategies you can use with your child in those big emotions, as we call it, in those big emotion moments, and what you need to work on with your child outside of those big emotional moments. Right. Because something that differs, I think, for most of us in our own childhood is our parents didn't teach us a lot of those coping mechanisms, those skills that we needed in order to emotionally regulate, in order to identify, okay, I'm feeling really agitated right now. One, to identify that in ourselves, and two, to be able to kind of use different coping mechanisms in order to regulate and go through those difficult moments. And so that's what we do as coaches, is we start with the basics, and we really empower the parents to understand and attune themselves with their children, and then be able to apply in a more conscious way of parenting, is respectful to the child and what it is that they're going through, but then also setting really firm boundaries around specific behaviors or specific unwanted or bad behaviors.
What was going on in our parents' brains that made it okay at the time to be more strict, or made it more like, oh, this is how you behave with children. You need to set, boundaries in this kind of way and be very, very like strict in the way that you raise
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Why have we moved away from that? What's going on?
So I would say there are two things. So the way that most parents used to kind of raise their children when we were kids, so our parents' generation, it was more of a top-down kind of authoritarian way of parenting. The understanding of parenting or child rearing back then was, yeah, Dr. Spock was kind of like the holy grail, the parenting guideline that so many mothers used to follow. And he talks about the tyranny of the infant, which is, the infant is a tyrant that demands so much, and you have to kind of squash that and limit it, which is completely the opposite of the way that we're understanding, children today. And the reason probably why it continued as such is because you see immediate benefits of that style of parenting. Like when a child is, say, misbehaves or is disrespectful, the parent would really shut it down quite quickly and quite consistently. So much so that the child, because children are wired for survival, children are very intuitive and pick up on this behavior is creating a disconnect with my parent, whom I need to survive. And so I will no longer continue this behavior in order to ensure my survival and my proximity to my parent. And so I don't think that parents back then did it with the intention of hurting. But what research is discovering now is that it's actually created so much damage in these children when they become adults, because that is kind of this fear-based way of parenting where the child would follow order because they were scared, not because they were learning how to behave differently or how to manage their emotions, right? So children, they don't distinguish their behavior from their emotion. All of that is lumped into one core belief about themselves, right? And that's why we grow up having these very skewed kind of beliefs that don't really serve us anymore. And so why we have moved into this style of parenting is because the research is finding that when you treat your children with respect and as individuals, in the sense of acknowledging that they do have emotions and they're allowed to have emotions, it's normal and natural for any human to go through a full range of emotions. Not all emotions, like humans aren't meant to always be happy. There's so much stigma around being angry or being sad or being frustrated, but the reality is all of those emotions are completely natural and they're telling us something important that's going on inside of us. And so when we accept those emotions in our children, they actually grow up to feel much more confident and assured of themselves, and will ultimately thrive as adults and their future relationships.
Do you take your own advice? Like,
yes.
And do you okay, yeah, yes, you take your own advice. But let me ask the question a different way. Do you feel more pressure now that you're a parent coach to be the model of this excellent parent? And sometimes you kind of wish or feel like, actually, I just want to be a bad parent today. I don't have enough to show up for my child. And how do you deal with that? Like, I suppose as your friend, I worry, do you give yourself a break?
So there's a few things. I mean, so a lot of parents, they struggle with perfectionism. I am one of them. There's so much pressure on moms today that we put on ourselves to be the perfect parent. And we try to do it all, right? Especially working moms, we want to be there for our kids and be there completely. We want to connect with them emotionally. We want to have all those fun moments and give them all of these happy memories. And then we also don't want to lose out on our career. And then we also have to, if we have a partner, we need to kind of maintain that relationship and a social relationship. So there's so much, there's such a big load on the mom. to kind of do it all. And what ends up happening is that there's a lot of burnout. We see a lot of burnout with moms. And I think that the biggest advice that we give to parents, which I do give to myself and I practice myself, is this notion around repair. And it kind of eases, like it lifts the lid off the pressure cooker of always being perfect, because we beat ourselves down when we aren't perfect, when we are triggered, you know, these trigger moments where we're just burnt out and we're no longer able to show up in the way that we want to. And we forget that we can just kind of reach into our strategy bag, I guess, if that's a thing, and pull out this idea of repairing, which means to apologize. And why I say that takes the pressure off the mom or any parent really, is that you're not meant to be perfect. You're not meant to be able to do it all perfectly all the time. And so it gives us a bit of leeway to say that, you know, when we don't kind of respond in a way that we want to respond, or don't show up in the way that we want to show up, we can come back and say, hey, you know, like to your kid, you can say, hey, you know, hey, kiddo, you know, mama kind of lost her temper there. That's not your fault, and you don't deserve to get shouted at. In our family, we always talk about how it's not okay to shout. That also applies to me. It's not okay for mommy to shout either, and I'm really sorry. And that actually, it validates the child's experience, because trust me, children know when they've been kind of shortchanged. And so it kind of, it makes them feel good when they're apologized to. And it also gives them this beautiful model of repair. And it also releases this idea of needing to be perfect for them.
What would your advice, just thinking it's Mother's Day, and to all the mom and the caregivers there supporting a child in their life, what advice would you leave them with?
It's so important to remember to practice self-compassion. I really believe in the idea of being compassionate. You know, we always talk about being compassionate and empathetic towards those around us. But it's also important, especially as a mom, we tend to forget, or as a caregiver, any kind of caregiver, is that we are so giving with our love and our attention that we deplete ourselves. And so we need to remember to be compassionate with ourselves, and to give ourselves the nurture and the love that we would give anybody else. We deserve it as well.